Kal Kadosh, Boker Or, Mesechet Nazir, Mishnayot. This is Perek Daled, chapter 4. The Mishnah starts, we're talking about right now, Misha Amar Hareni Nazir. Imagine you're being come and he says, I'm going to become a Nazir. V'shama chavero ve'amar va'ani. And another friend said va'ani, meaning, one person comes and he says he's a Nazir, and he's got two friends. So one of them comes and he says, and it has to be Toch Kedei Dibur within the 2-3 seconds, he says, I also, and I. And the same thing with the third person, Va'ani. So says the Mishnah, Kulam Nazirim, all of them become Nazirim. However, though, since each one is dependent upon the first one, so therefore, Hutara Rishon, Utru Kulan. What happens if the first person comes now and he annuls his Nazirut? How does he annul his Nazirut? He has what's called a Hatara. They find a petach, they find an opening that if he would have known what he would have vowed, he would have never made it. And therefore they annul it. Okay, that's called that they annul it retroactively, as if that it never existed. So, Hutara Rishon, Hutru Kulan. All the three of them, they all become not Nazirim. Because since I broke the chain, which was the first one, and he was the original, so if I destroyed the original, everything else becomes destroyed. Hutara Acharon, but what happens if I only annul the last one? That means the last one did Atarat Nedarim. So Acharon Mutar. So only the last one is going to be permitted, but everyone else is going to be prohibited as Nazirim. Amar Areni Nazir v'shama chavero ve'amar. What happens if somebody comes and he says that he's going to be a Nazir? His friend listens to him, and his friend tells him, Pi kefiv. My mouth is like your mouth. Obviously, the mouth is referring to the isur of drinking wine. Us'ari kisaro, and my hair is like his hair. Obviously, referring to the isur of cutting the hair, because it's also a Nazir not allowed to do. Harez a Nazir, so that's a Nazir. Why? Because it does take into effect what he said, because it's basically saying he's also a Nazir, even though he doesn't say an I, where he says, am I also a Nazir? But basically, you imply very, very understandingly that you know that this is a Nazir. Hareni Nazir v'shama ishto ve'amra vani. Imagine a person comes and he says he's a Nazir. Now his wife is right behind him, and the wife says va'ani, yeah, and I. Meferet shela v'shelo kayam. He's allowed to do a farat nedarim. There's a difference between a tarat nedarim and a farat nedarim. A tarat nedarim is done by a chacham, or three chachamim, or three people that they come and they annul the vow, and that happens retroactively. The husband could only do a farat nedarim. So it's either a father or the husband. A father when the girl is very young, or a husband when she's married, and the husband does hafarat nedarim, which he annuls the vow just on the basis that he doesn't want it. But the difference between this one and the other one is that this is only going to be from now onwards. It's not retroactively. So therefore, he comes and he says he's a Nazir. She comes in and she says an I. He comes and says, no, I don't want it. I don't want her to become a Nazira. So therefore, what happens? Meferet shela, but he's still a Nazir because he never took off his. He just doesn't want her to become a Nazira. That's fine. What happens though if she's a Nazira? She comes and she says, Hareni Nazira. Now he hears it. Shama Bala, the husband listens. V'amar va'ani. And now he says, and I also. Here, he cannot do Afrat Nedarim. Because the fact that he depended his Nazirut on her Nazirut, and it shows that Ki'ilu, that he was happy about it, the second that he says, and I, so now he can't annul her Nazirut anymore. Because beforehand, he didn't want it. So therefore, he could annul it. But the second that he shows that he's wanting it, that he's happy with it, so now he cannot annul anymore her Hafarat Nedarim. Mishna bet. Hareni Nazir ve'at. Whenever the person comes and he says he's a Nazir, and then he asks his wife, and you, what are you? So she says, Amen. She says, yes, Amen, which means I agree also. I'm also a Nazira. Meferet shela v'shelo kayam. He could still do Hafarat Nedarim. And he is a Nazir. Why? Because the etzem, the asking her, is not considered that he actually is a confirmation of her vow. So therefore, right, it doesn't work. However, though, if he told her, right, if he told her to become a Nazira like himself, and she agreed, so then now that's it, because now he wants her to become a Nazira. So that, but here, he's just asking, and you, Amen, I don't want you to become a Nazira. He's still allowed to do that. Hareni Nazira ve'ata. What about the opposite case? She says she's a Nazira. She says, and you? Amen. He says Amen. Same thing. He cannot annul it. Because the fact that he showed that he was happy because he said Amen, that he also wants to be a Nazir, so therefore he's happy with her being a Nazira, and therefore he cannot annul it. Mishnah Gimel, number 3. Imagine a woman is coming. She says that she's going to become a Nazir, and then what happens is she's drinking wine, or she's becoming metameh metim. Right now, this is all before the husband came and annulled it. So what happens? She's going to get 40 lashes, right? Why? Because again, it's not really 40, it's 39 lashes. But basically what happens is that the fact that she's going against it and she's knowing that she's not allowed to do that, right? So obviously, she has to be warned in advance and witnesses and everything. So what happens? She gets lashes. What happens if the husband annulled her and she didn't even know about it? Meaning she comes, she says she's a Nazira. All of a sudden, she's going to come to become mitamemet, to purify herself with a dead corpse to the cemetery, or she's going to start drinking wine. The husband finds out at home and he says, Ani meferla. He annuls it. So what happens? And she doesn't get lashes. Why? Because at the end of the day, he annulled it first. So she wasn't doing an Avirah. However, though in her mind she was. So Rabbi Yehuda says, so you're right, she's not going to get the lashes in Doraita. But he spoke Makat Mardut, she should still get Makat Mardut, which is Midrabanan, meaning rabbinical lashes, because the fact that she was like rebellious, because in her mind she was rebelling. She didn't know that her husband came and her husband already annulled it. So the fact that in her mind she was doing something rebellious, she should be punished. Mishnah Daled, number 4. What happens right now? A woman comes and she makes herself into a Nazir. Remember that a Nazir has to bring 3 animals when they finish the Nazirut process. So Aisha Shenadra Benazir, and she separates her animals. Now the husband comes and he does Hafarat Nedarim. What are you going to do with these animals now? If it was his animals, so therefore they go to the fields and they graze. Why? Because even though, right, a woman has the right to take animals from her husband in order to pay off her debts, what they call them, for the korbanot. However, though here, once he annulled it, there's no debt. So if there's no debt, there's no korbanot, there's nothing. So therefore, when she came and she separated it, it's nothing. There's nothing there. However, though, what happens if it's her animals? If it's hers. So he says, if it's going to be the korban chatat, tamut, you have to let it die. Because remember, the law is that a chatat, the owners die, they have to let it die. So to here, kilu, since it was cancelled out, you have to let the animal die. The korban olah, tikrav olah, you could bring it. It's like a olah. Why? It's an edava. It's a present. You could bring a burnt offering. To do the shlamim, which is the peace offering, that you're going to bring the shlamim. However, though, regular shlamims, which are nedava, you could eat it shnei yamim v'layla echad, 2 days and 1 night. So you've got a long period of time, 48 hours, 2 days and 1 night in order to eat it. Here, you're going to go stringent, like the one of the Nazir, v'nechalim yom echad. You could only eat it for 1 night. 1 day and 1 night. That's the laws of Nazir of Shlamim. Okay, now he comes and he says, so therefore here, the fact that you're giving it a stringency of the Nazirut Shlamim. However, though it does not need the bread, meaning a regular Shlamim, you have to bring breads. Here, right? Sorry, not the Nazir Shlamim, has to be brought bread. Here, since she's not anymore Nazirah, so she doesn't have to bring the breads. Okay, what happens if she has money that was unspecified for what to use each part of the money for? But that money was specified that obviously she was going to use it for the Nazirut, but she didn't, it wasn't specified this is for this is for that, this is for the Khatat, the Ulah, the Shlamim. All of a sudden, she just had money. So if it's Mount Sumimi Plun in the Nedava, you just have to give it as a Nedava, as a present, right? Which usually goes for the Ulat Nedava. Ma'ot Mefurashim, if you had money, which is separate, meaning this money is going for the Khatat, this money is going, so he says, Demeh Khatat, the money of the Khatat has to go Yam HaMelach. You have to throw it in the sea. Why? It gets lost, just like by the animal that it gets right? V'lo ma'alim, there's no milah. Why is no milah? Because you can't use it to buy any offering. Demei olah, the money of the korban olah, right? You have to use it as an olah. You're going to bring it as a korban olah, right? And nedava, obviously. And mu'alim, there's a problem of milah, so you're not allowed to benefit from it. Demei shlamim, to do the shlamim, yaviu shlamim, you're going to bring a shlamim. V'nechalim yom echad, and to nechem again, as we mentioned before, you're only going to eat it 1 day and 1 night, and they don't need any breads whatsoever, not like a regular Nazir, because she's not a Nazira anymore. Mishnah He, right? Number 5. Nizrak alei acham min adamim. Imagine right now they come and she finished the entire process. The husband was out of town. He had no idea what was going on. She finishes the entire process and they start sprinkling one of the bloods. Once they sprinkle one of the bloods of her korbanot, eno yachol le'afer. The husband cannot annul anymore. He says, why? Because it's already too late, right? He can't cancel it out because basically the vow no longer prohibits her to do anything. Because once they sprinkle the blood, now she's permitted. So once she's permitted, what's he going to annul? Annul what? She already brought the korban. Rabbi Akiva says, no. Afilu nishchata alea achat. Even if they did the shchita, enu yachol le'afer. She cannot annul. Why? Shitat Rabbi Kiva is that even though she could still not drink, Rabbi Kiva doesn't want it to go to waste like a korban. Meaning they already did the slaughtering. Now they have to take the blood and they're going to sprinkle it. So in between this time, if he's going to cancel it, he just put the entire behemah to loss. So we don't want that. But in one of these words, he says betiglacha tara. That means Rabbi Kiva only agrees that this is going to work if she finishes her process and now she's going to become pure. What happens though if it's tiglacha tuma'ah? Meaning in the middle of her 30 days, even on the 29th day, she becomes tmeah. She becomes impure. She has to start again. So she has to bring the korbanot. She has to do everything. She's going to have to start the entire process again. Here in this case of tiglacha tumah, he could do afarat nedarim. Why? Because he says, I don't want a deprived wife. I don't want a wife that she can't drink wine. So therefore, imagine, look how long already she wasn't drinking wine. He only found out now, though, because remember, the second he finds out, he doesn't have 30 days to cancel it. He has to cancel it right away. Here, he only found out on the last day. But since we're talking about tiglacha tum'ah, he couldn't know because he says, I don't want such a wife. Rabbi Omer, after tiglacha tara, even tiglacha tara would still be the same halacha. Why? He doesn't want his wife that's going to be shaven. Remember when they finish, they shave all the hair. So here, if you look in, there's going to be a machloket to do with the Tanakama and everything to do with wearing a wig. The Tanakama, Rabbi disagrees with Tanakama, and he says that wearing a wig does not resolve the problem because again, since it has to do with Beno Levenab, between him and her, right? We're talking about the intimacy and everything else. So therefore, he just doesn't want that. So since he doesn't want that, it could be that he's going to be disgusted with his wife wearing somebody else's hair. So therefore, because of that, it doesn't work. So he could just say, I don't want it, even if it's going to be Tiglacha Tara at the end of the entire service. Mishna Vav, Mishnah number 6. Ha'ish Madira Beno Nazir. A man could make his son into a Nazir. Okay, that means his son is talking about the right, he can make a minor, right? A child, a son of bar mitzvah into a Nazir, but a woman cannot. But a woman cannot. That's halakha l'Moshe Sinai. We learn it that only a father could make his son, but not a mother could not make the son. However, though, right, Ketzad, what happens right now if the family members or the boy himself goes against it? Meaning they could come and they could annul it. How? The boy himself or the relatives, they cut the hair, right? Showing that they reject what the father did to the son. Or, right, he comes and he protests and he says he doesn't want to, right? You know, what are we going to do with the, so what do we do now with these animals? So he says, if the father already separated an animal for this Nazir, for his son, Hachatat, the same thing. The chatat is going to die, the sin offering. Haolah, the korban olah is going to be brought as an olah, as a burnt offering. The shlamim is going to be brought as a shlamim, as a peace offering. And again, it's going to be eaten to one day and one night, not like a regular shlamim, and it does not need bread. Ayulo mouths to me if he had money that was not designated, yiplun in dava. It's going to go as in a dava, all the money. Ma'od mefurashin, if it's money which was designated for each one. Temeh chatat, the same halachas we learned before, the same Mishnah. Temeh chatat yilchu liyam hamelech. The money of the chatat goes thrown to the sea. Lo nenim lo, you're not going to benefit, but it's not going to be milah. Temeh olah, the money of the olah is going to go for korban olah, mo'alim, and there's going to be a problem of milah. Right? Why? Because you can still use it as an olah, so there's milah. You're not allowed, it's consecrated. You're not allowed to use it. Temeh shlamim, you bring it as a shlamim. It's going to be eaten as one day and one night, and it does not need any bread. Mishnah Zayin, Mishnah 7. Ha'ish megaleach al nezirut aviv. A man may shave on the nazirut of his father, right? Meaning using the money that was set aside for his father, but not a woman. What was the case? If the father's a nazir, he separates money and then he dies, and then he says he's going to become a nazir on condition that he's using his father's money. It goes to the deva. Why? The second that the father died, that money has to go to the Bet Mikdash. If that money goes to the Bet Mikdash, he can't just come and say, you know what, I'm going to use that money. It's already used. It's already gone to the Bet Mikdash. It's already gone. It doesn't help. However, though, he says, if he and his father are Nazirim at the same time, and then the father separates the money, stumim, right, and then he dies, here he could, because basically here what's happening is that since the son was already a Nazir, the money does not automatically become designated for communal sacrifice when he dies, but it's shifted to the son, from the father to the son. Okay, this is also Hechal Moshe Sinai is brought down in the Gemara, and therefore he's allowed to use it in such a case. Have a wonderful day.